OSIWA.org. WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Banjul, 1 p.m. in Port Novo. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. First, our headline stories. U.S. jury convicts Michael Correa, a former Gambian soldier, on 6 counts of torture.
I feel like this is just the beginning. I'm humbled, grateful that he was able to at least be found guilty of something.
One of the crimes that he was charged of was conspiracy to commit torture. And it was very clear, even on the audio that was played as an exit, conspiring to attend torture of other victims.
Guinea launches a biometric exercise ahead of the September 21 referendum and general elections. Benin's National Electoral Commission unveils calendar for the 2026 elections.
Both documents are concise and focused on key dates, taking into account the start and end of each activity. They are essentially dynamic, and their implementation will take into account both internal and external constraints.
And Amnesty International calls for the protection of elderly women accused of witchcraft in Ghana. Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us and welcome to our listeners across the sub-region and beyond. Now, a U.S. court has found former Gambian soldier Michael Correa guilty on all 6 charges of torture and conspiracy to commit torture in a landmark ruling. Correa, a former member of the Junglers, was also found guilty by jurors at the week-long trial in Denver on Tuesday of participating in a plot to torture suspected opponents of the rule of former President Yahya Jammeh 20 years ago. Witnesses who testified against Correa produced audio recordings and photos. Several rights defenders and activists at the courthouse expressed their satisfaction with the decision and complimented the process. Askanwi's managing editor, Yusuf Taylor, discussed the trial's verdict with the relatives of the victims.
I feel like this is just the beginning. I'm humbled, grateful that he was able to at least be found guilty of something, even though if it was not for the murder of my brother, because we 100% believe he was a factor or he was a contributing factor to the murder of my brother. I believe that this is just the beginning.
When they were reading the charges that he was guilty of, I was counting my fingers to be sure that he would be guilty of all the charges that were put forward. And thankfully he was, because evidence is very clear to show that he was the one who committed these crimes. And obviously, one of the crimes that he was charged of was conspiracy to commit torture. And it was very clear, even on the audio that was played as an exhibit.
Yes, his own voice.
His own voice confirming to torture, confirming to attend the torture of other victims. And he had also confirmed that he was a jungler.
Everybody throughout this case, one of the important things that they've been highlighting is this is happening in America. We've seen what happened in Switzerland and we saw what happened in Germany. You've made reference to them, Bailo, Usman Sonko. What's your message to the Gambia government?
My message to the Gambian government is to really work hand in hand with the victims to ensure they support them. Victims need to be preserved because a lot of victims are dying, in a sense that those that are going through serious medical complications, and we need these victims to testify in cases like this. So for the Gambian government also, the political will as well should be there to ensure that these crimes are prosecuted, in a sense that ensuring that we have all the capacities in place, because to be quite honest, it does not happen overnight.
Voices of relatives of victims of right violations in the Gambia during the era of Jammeh. Now, Correa faces up to 20 years for each of the 6 counts he was convicted of. Crossing over to the Sahel, nearly 100 political parties met in Bamako, the Malian capital, on Tuesday to express their firm opposition to the consultation aimed at reviewing the party charter. Announced last week by transitional authorities, These consultations are scheduled to begin today, Wednesday, April 16, in the regions before the national phase takes over. Skeptical about the initiative, the political actors question whether the ultimate goal will be the outright dissolution of the political parties. Sankle Janko reports.
Guarded within the Initiative of Political Parties for the Charter, IPAC, these political actors initially indicated they would not participate in these consultations. Speaking at the conference, Umar Ibrahima Toure, a member of IPAC, believes that this desire of the transitional authorities has hidden agendas. It is worth noting that Mali adopted a multi-party system as far back as 1991. Key figures in the struggle that led to the advent of this era reaffirmed that they have no intention of backing down and will fight to preserve the survival of political parties. A charge reiterated by Alassane Abba, Secretary General of the Convergence for the Development of Mali, CODEM. While Mali has nearly 300 political parties, new parties continue to emerge. The development, Yusuf Jawara, president of the Yelema party, says he doesn't understand. Those who addressed the press also indicated that they had unsuccessfully requested an audience with the transitional Prime Minister, General Abdoulaye Maiga, to discuss the postponement of the announced consultations.
A report filed in by WADR's Bamako correspondent Aliyu Cham and voiced in our studios by Sankule Janko. Elsewhere, Guinea has launched a biometric sensors operation to cover the entire national territory. The 45th exercise will enable the state to generate a civil registration register and a unique identifier for citizens. According to the Minister of Territorial Administration, General Ibrahim Khalil Konde, data from the operation will support the establishment of an electoral register. This civil registration exercise is a prelude to the constitutional referendum of September 21, 2025. However, the opposition in Guinea discredits the implementation of the process, accusing the ruling military of wanting to provide Guinea with a tailor-made electoral register. United within the forces vive of Guinea, the opposition denounces the unilateral conduct of the electoral process. It also demands the establishment of a framework for dialogue to discuss the terms of reference for the organization of elections.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we're live on YouTube at WADR and on Facebook, WADR English Service. Let's take you to Benin, where the National Autonomous Electoral Commission on Tuesday unveiled the 2026 general elections calendar. President of the Electoral Commission, Saka Lafia, revealed the timetables in a ceremony attended by political parties, state institutions, relevant ministries, the media, and civil society in Cotonou, the nation's capital. Here is WAD's Aziz Adam Silis report presented by Francis Boniface.
The electoral law requires the Electoral Commission to inform the public of the electoral calendar. The legislative and municipal elections will be held on January 11, 2026, while the presidential elections will take place on April 12 and May 10, 2026. Nearly 100 activities will take place during these two major events, including the registration of candidates, the distribution of voter registration cards, the electoral campaign, the training of officials, and the announcement of results. Saka Lafia is the president of the Autonomous Electoral Commission.
Both documents are concise and focused on key dates, taking into account the start and end of each activity. They are essentially dynamic, and their implementation will take into account both internal and external constraints. They represent important internal planning tools for political parties, alongside those they have established to enable them to organize and prepare for upcoming elections.
These are planning tools designed to allow each stakeholder, especially political parties, to better prepare without being caught off guard. Saka Lafia also emphasized that this document must be circulated, known, and understood by the public to ensure a transparent and inclusive electoral process. But not everything is set in stone. The Senate president made it clear that these timetables are open to change. In other words, they can be adjusted as needed, depending on the realities on the ground. He called on every Beninese to get involved to ensure that these elections are a true success in peace and respect for the law. The Election Commission boss assures of his organization's seriousness, impartiality, and rigor in the entire process.
A report by WADR's Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Sule and presented by Francis Boniface. In Nigeria, Plateau State continues to receive senior cabinet officials and top-ranking security operatives as indigents mourn victims of the recent deadly attack. Monday's attack by unknown gunmen targeted Ziki, a farming community, resulting in several deaths and huge material damage. In less than a month, attacks in Plateau have claimed over 100 lives, including women and children. As WADR's Usman Omar reports, the gunmen responsible for the brutal killings are yet to be identified.
On Tuesday, Plateau State Governor Caleb Mutfwang and the Inspector General of Police Kayode Egbetokun separately visited the affected communities where they met residents still struggling to come to terms with the scale of the tragedy. Governor Mutfwang assured the community dwellers of increased security presence and surveillance.
I myself have been crying since yesterday because I had trusted God that all the arrangements were put in place, that this will not happen again. We have made investments in security, but like all human arrangements, sometimes they fail. And I want to admit that on Sunday night into Monday morning, we failed you. Please forgive us.
The visits by the state and security authorities have been acknowledged as necessary steps towards healing and investigation. Residents of the affected communities say they need sustained government action and a national show of solidarity in their moment of grief. Security operatives are, for their part, intensifying efforts to apprehend the perpetrators and prevent further attacks in the once peaceful state. Some stakeholders have, however, expressed disappointment over the absence of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Currently on an official trip to France, the Nigerian leader is yet to visit the affected areas, but has in a statement sympathized with the state and victims of the attacks. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Meanwhile, Amnesty International is calling on the Ghanaian government to shut down witch camps in the northern region where more than 500 women live after being accused of witchcraft. A new report by the rights watchdog further reveals the deplorable living conditions of the affected people. The organization is urging the government to take immediate action and pass a long-delayed anti-witchcraft bill into law. From Accra, Nadiri Tete completes the story.
They are called witches, not by law, but by communities that see them as a cause of misfortunes. And once accused, women, mostly elderly, are forced to flee their homes and live in isolated camps across the northern part of Ghana. Many are attacked, rejected by their communities and forced to live in poor conditions without enough food, clean water, or medical care. More than 500 of them live in these camps according to Amnesty International's latest report titled Branded for Life. Speaking during the presentation of the report, Amnesty's country director for Ghana, Genevieve Patenting, urged the government to immediately close all the witch camps.
We call on the government of Ghana to look into a gradual closure and reintegration of women from the alleged witch camps back into their communities or elsewhere they feel safe. These camps are not a permanent refuge. They are a symbol of societal neglect.
The organization is renewing its call for the passage of the reintroduced anti-witchcraft bill, which could criminalize witchcraft accusations and related issues.
We cannot allow this injustice to continue. The government has a duty, both moral and constitutional, to act decisively. That is why today we make clear and urgent call for legislative action to protect elderly women from these baseless accusations and the violence that often follows.
Though Parliament passed the bill in July 2023, it did not receive presidential assent under the erstwhile administration, leaving hundreds of women still vulnerable. The rights watchdog is demanding swift government action, a national awareness campaign, and sustainable support for reintegrating affected women. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. We are live online at wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. U.S. jury convicts Michael Correa, a former Gambian soldier, on 6 counts of torture. Guinea launches a biometric exercise ahead of September 21 referendum and general elections. Benin's National Electoral Commission unveils calendar for the 2026 general elections. Amnesty International Ghana calls for the protection of elderly women accused of witchcraft in the country. Still ahead in the news, the Lancet Health Commission reveals gap in global efforts to achieve SDGs through entry. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. The Lancet Commission, a universal health research body, has called on world leaders to critically harmonize the understanding of gender in order to achieve health equity. The Commission's April 2025 report reveals that globally, the world is not close to achieving SDGs 3 and 5 on health, well-being, and gender equality, respectively. This, the Commission says, is due to a non-definitive and globally accepted legal definition of the term gender, which directly correlates with environment and health. Christopher Ticho has more on this report.
The report, titled Achieving Gender Justice for Global Health Equity, reveals that realizing gender justice in universal health remains a challenge, as countries do not have disaggregated data on gender issues in order to tailor specific interventions to reduce the gap and enhance global health coverage, as issues of gender-based discrimination and exclusion persist. At the center of this troubling development is the non-clarity of the term gender. El-Haj Al-Sain is the co-chair of the Gender and Health Committee.
Health is not only, the absence, of disease or infirmity, but health, as it is defined, is a complete state of well-being. And if we do so, we realize, that things like gender are quite central to it because it determines, the power structure within societies. It determines also, the levels of risk and vulnerabilities that we face.
On her part, the co-chair and co-CEO of the Global Health 50/50, Professor Sarah Hawkes, called for effective collaboration among actors of the SDGs Goal 3 and 5 in order to achieve sustainable development.
So we're not on track to meet the health goals, but whether we're on track to meet the health goals for men and women is not clear because often health data are not disaggregated by sex. I can't tell you who's worse off, men or women, because countries often don't provide that data. Once you've got the disaggregated data, then you can start to see where you need to intervene to actually reduce the gap. But right now, what we see is a complete disjuncture between SDG 3 and SDG 5, which is the gender goal.
The Lancet Commission report recommended 3 key things: thus an international legal definition of gender, the establishment of a hosting platform for data collection, as well as a new mechanism to finance gender justice.
Christopher Ticho reporting there. The Liberian government is set to host a strategic retreat in Monrovia on Thursday under the leadership of President Joseph Boakai. The high-level meeting aims to realign funding efforts and address shortcomings caused by the previous government and the suspension of USAID assistance.
This is the Newspaper Review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the Newspaper Review.
The Newspaper Review.
Across the Gambia, families of victims and victims themselves of rights violations during the Ajami regime have welcomed a U.S. federal court ruling the trial of Michael Correa, a former Gambian soldier. He was convicted of 6 counts of torture, a decision complemented by witnesses in Denver, as you have heard at the beginning of this news broadcast. But what is the mood like back home in the Gambia? And what are the dailies reporting?
Michael Sankoria's trial in the US apparently is dominating headlines on Gambian dailies today. Let's begin with the Fourier newspaper. And the Fourier newspaper's lead story today reads, ex-jungler Michael Sankoria convicted of torture in US. His trial began last week in a federal court in Denver. And according to this lead story on the Fourier newspaper, he has been convicted of torture. Well, sentencing, according to reports, will come pretty soon, somewhere in June or July. This other one reads, EBID grants $10 million loan to Gambia to boost security. This other one reads, President Barrow pledges to commit funds for reparation as foreign aid drops. Now, let's take a look at the Point newspaper, and the lead story on the Point newspaper also is related to Michael Sankoria's U.S. court trial, and it reads, U.S. federal court finds Korea guilty of all counts of torture and conspiracy to commit torture. Supreme Court to hear FGM suit. Recall National Assembly members opted to uphold the law banning FGM in the Gambia. This sort of one reads, Gambia among 10 U.S. embassies facing potential closure. Supreme Court commits Young's death sentence to life imprisonment. Let's take a look at the final newspaper, and that is the Standard newspaper. Interestingly, their lead story is not related to this Michael Sankoria story, and it reads, government ought to be prudent in privatizing public assets. Sankoria guilty of torture. This other one reads, a police investigating document leak. Yankuba Toure's death sentence reduced to life. Yankuba Toure was found guilty of crimes against humanity and was sentenced to death by the High Court of the Gambia. But according to this report, that the sentence to death has now been commuted to life sentence. And the final story reads, victims group disagrees with my over Jammeh's prosecution. Former presidential advisor and party leader of Gambia Moral Congress, Mai Fati, recently said it would be unwise for the government to spend $60 million to prosecuting Jammeh and few other people, instead urging the government to spend that money on victims to perhaps rebuild their life. But according to this report, victims group disagree with this particular statement. I'm afraid these are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Sankule Janko.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest this afternoon is Gafoudou Sakpoho, a Beninese journalist and political analyst. Sakpoho joins us from Cotonou, where the Electoral Commission on Tuesday unveiled the 2026 general elections calendar. While the unveiling is seen as a step in the right direction, revision of the electoral roll and the new electoral codes remain major concerns for the opposition in the country. Our guest also says that with elections fast approaching, CSOs in Benin face limitations.
Well, there hasn't been any major reactions, especially from the political actors. There hasn't been much reaction. I think it's a good thing. The goal is to help all the stakeholders have a better follow-up of what will happen and how it's going to happen. Now, the major issues remain as far as political parties are concerned, which I think the Electoral Commission is not entitled to address, but we haven't really, so far, we haven't, maybe in the next few hours, we have more reactions from political parties.
But again, you talked about one major issue. That would be the review or revision of the electoral roll. That is one major issue that the opposition in Benin is calling for. Yeah,
I mean, we have the electoral roll that is, I think is underway, but still the issue related to the electoral codes, which is still like a major issue for most of political parties, because some parties may not be able to be part of the election if ever they don't have the required number of supporters in terms of mayors and also in terms of MPs, especially for the opposition. It's a very, very tricky issue.
The electoral calendar has been unveiled. Do you think overall, at least by end of the year, that the political climate in Benin is going to heat up, and how do you foresee some of the changes occurring?
It's true that the electoral code is saying that you cannot unveil your candidate 6 months before the election. You have to wait until 6 months before the the dates that have been known before you unveil your candidates to the elections. And so far, I think everyone is trying to abide by that. And any attempt to nominate or call somebody's name is forbidden. And even those who tried found themselves in jail. So because the new law does not allow you to, even from the government side, you cannot really show any particular support that does not come from the choice, because the rule is the parties that must really make the choice of their candidates. You, as individual, cannot really support the candidacy of an individual, a person that was not chosen by the party, and the parties cannot really unveil their candidates until June or July this year. So we hope, it's our wish that there's no major problems, it does not heat up. But I think that everyone is just careful and pray for the best. Otherwise, the way things are right now, there are more chances that the situation heats up is very high.
Do you see CSOs mobilizing ahead of the 2026 general elections just so that there is a free, transparent and inclusive elections, and not just that, also that peace is maintained before, during and post-election period?
A few days ago, there was the Catholic Church that organized a kind of conference along with the CSO, and they even invited the biggest political parties, and they raised some concerns that they want to see addressed by the government and also by the institution in charge of organizing elections. But one thing is sure, is that CSOs are not that much free to speak as they used to.
Gafodu Sakboho, a Beninese journalist and political analyst. Well, in a thrilling encounter marked by tactical discipline and missed chances, Morocco edged Cote d'Ivoire 4-3 on penalties after a goalless 90 minutes of regulation time. Both sides crafted several promising opportunities, yet were ultimately let down by a poor finish and leaving the deadlock intact until the decider. The host country, Morocco, eventually winning on penalties to keep their home soil triumph alive. Meanwhile, Mali booked their place in the final of the CAF Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations with a commanding 2-0 win over Burkina Faso in Tuesday's semi-final in Casablanca. A goal in each half was enough to send the Young Eagles through to Saturday's championship match, where they will face Morocco in the final. In the UEFA Champions League, Barcelona secured semi-final qualification despite losing to Dortmund on Tuesday. Aston Villa beat PSG 3-2 at home, but it was not enough as the Parisians qualified to semi-final. All eyes will now be on Real Madrid taking on Arsenal, hoping to turn around the 3-goal deficit. And that's how we wrap up this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for tuning in, and special thanks to Mustafa Sek, Mamkodu Fai, and Umo Daniego for technical support. Connect with us on our social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR English, on Facebook, WADR English Service, and stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a replay of our agenda program 50/50, to be followed at the top of the hour of 1 p.m. with the second edition of our comprehensive news package in French and for Shefu with Alpha Abubakar. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Baf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.